Ok, ahí me va bien, ¿no?
Sí, okay.
Va. Voy
Uh,
a prender la luz, quizá me vea mejor.
Hello, good evening. Uh, I'm
Yo, yo,
here.
yo, 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 yo lo, eso yo lo digo.
Okay, okay.
Ok, ahí va.
Adelante.
Va. Una, dos, tres. Hello, everyone. Otra vez. Ya. Una, dos, tres. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you to my team, Ian and Valeria. I'm here with Rafael Martinez Gonzalez, that is a teacher at University of Anahuac University. Also, his studies are bachelor's degree in economics at University of Ciudad Juarez, master's degree in urban economic at Colegio de Mexico, and PhD in political science at UNAM. Also, he's a specialist in property rights. So we have three questions to talk about the property rights. Hello, Rafa. How are you?
Hello, Emilio. Good morning.
Good morning. So to start, to begin, can you explain the concept of property rights and why they are important?
Sure. First, we have to address that the question about property rights has to do more with the system of laws in the countries that with economics. Since property is a category, is a theme that every law has about has to do with objects. There is, of course, different kinds of property. There is, for example, in Mexico, there is, of course, private property, but also public property. And there is this category that has to do with history in the 1930s with the government of Lázaro Cárdenas that
Right.
has to do with tierras ejidales. That will be the land of the peasant and people in the country. Uh, that is different because not all countries, not all nations has this system. So if we want to talk about property rights, we have to address these three categories: public property, property, and of course, peasant property. So why are they important? Because they tell these property rights that talk about uh, how the persons can dispose of the objects. For example, if we are in a collective system of property, that means that not only one individual has the property of the object, but all the community. And this is very difficult. That this has advantages and disadvantages, of course. For example, one advantage will be that the persons talk about the utility of the use of this object. For example, a river, for example, a land,
Mhm.
soil. Also, these are natural resources, and this will be come to an end someday. I hope this is not very soon. uh, but this is this kind of different kind of uh, a system of property rights can bring some discussions and fights, of course. But mainly, property rights in this Occidental society will be private property and public property. Public property, of course, we'll talk about the property of government, since the government represents the uh, citizens of a nation, of a country, yes. And private property has to do more with the property of the individuals. Uh, this is very different because some persons violate some rights of the persons, and there is a right of citizen to have property. Why? This will be addressed more ahead.
Okay. And talking about Mexico, what are some challenges in enforcing property rights?
Sure. Well, if
If you want, don't only talk about Mexico, you can talk about developing countries.
Mm, thank you, because there is some other examples in Mexico. Well, of course, we have as I was talking, a different kind of system of property because we have this middle category name property of peasants. But this is very old, but it continues present in the Constitution. So your question was about enforcing property rights.
Mhm.
Well, I was talking about the advantages and disadvantages of property, for example, collective property.
Mhm.
And I was talking about one disadvantage and at the same time advantage about talking about the process of uh, taking decisions in respect to the use of some object. For example, a river, I was talking about river,
Mhm.
but also a mountain and also natural resources in general, and public space. And this is a concept very important for the economics, socially, politically. Public space has to do what can people do in the area they are inhabiting with other persons. So public space will be uh, this resource that persons can use to develop their own develop.
Okay.
What has sorry
Uh, no, no,
not
no, it's
yet.
okay. It's okay. Continue, continue. I'm sorry.
Okay. Uh, so one advantage of property rights will be that persons can be reliable about the use of these objects. So if a person can rely on the dispose of the determined resource, they can plan. They can plan to the future. They can plan to develop economic activities, and with these activities, they can provide themselves with some quality of life. Um, if you do not have property rights, the more often thing that will happen is what we will call a steal or robbery. So this is very complicated because the law has the objective, the task to protect these property rights. So what will be a challenge in enforcing property rights? First, to enforce the apparatus of state. The how can you say the arm the arm of the state that can protect these property rights in order to protect their rights of the citizens. And this
Okay.
is very important. This is very important because much governments they like to apply a law of or a politic of hard fist in order to disincentivize robbery or stealing. But this is cultural. This
Mm.
is not a logical step in societies. Uh, there is some authors, for example, that talks that in Mexico we were never moderns. We are about in 19th century in terms of mentality, and this is a clear fight in terms of how people process these concepts. Uh, Private property is very uh, interiorized in mentality of Mexicans, but there is, as I was telling, this other system that has to do with collective property. And some persons think that they have a right to public space and to the public property. And
Mm.
I will not tell, I will not take a side. This
No,
is,
I think also we can take the examples like the beaches in all the coasts in Mexico
for
that
example, yes.
people are getting in these beaches to take it, and if you want to go, you pay to the people that are propertying these beaches. So it's difficult, because
Yes.
it has to take out the problem, the situation about the property rights. So it's and
Yeah.
also, but I would like to ask you one last questions
Okay.
about if you want, if you can provide examples of how property rights have been used to alleviate poverty or
Yeah.
improve social equity.
Sure. Well, property rights has to do also with intellectual property.
Okay.
Some economic systems, free market economies mainly, they develop this system in which ideas of the persons are protected. So there is a protection for logos, for example. If you clone the tennis shoes in Mexico without the permission of Nike, for example, and
Mhm.
Nike realize that you are doing that, you can have a problem, a legal problem. But
Okay.
this has to do with formal and informal economy. Uh, this is very hard to process, to understand. Why? Because the conditions, the economic and production conditions in which persons carry out their economic activities are very different. That is to say, in USA, in United States, there is a lot of economic incentives for the part of government, and there is economic conditions, physical conditions, very useful, efficient to provide or to produce these objects, these merchandise, these products. Mexico, we don't have that. We don't have that. We have a lot of violence. We have a lot of stealing. We have a lot of robbery,
Mhm.
and sometimes governments they don't do their work in terms of provide incentives for the economic production or activities. So if you want to alleviate poverty through property rights and intellectual property, you have to protect this. You have to protect the ideas of the citizens. And that has to do also with a correct part of the government that address this problem specifically, not only to react, but also to anticipate the problems.
Okay.
Uh, this is very hard. This is very hard because in Mexico, as a much part of Latin America and part of Africa and part of Asia, our governments do not characterize for being
Mhm.
efficient. Uh, and this is also a problem. For example, in Asia, there is these two countries, Singapore, and I don't remember the other one, but we can talk about Singapore.
Okay.
Uh, in Singapore, they have this political leader, and he suppressed democracy. He suppressed democracy. He I don't know, I don't remember his name, but he suppressed democracy for about 40 years. And in these 40 years, he tries to put in the law to condemn some crimes. One crime that he condemned was to violate the intellectual property. And
Okay.
what happened is that Singapore firms copy the models of production in Japan and China, and they improve these models and they patent these models. And if you want to produce some merchandise with Singapore models, you have to pay them. This is to protect. This is to protect
Okay.
ideas, and this is okay. And of course, you are not allowed. You're not obligated to pay to Singapore. But if you go to Singapore, they have knowledge that you are copying their models, you're going to jail. You're going to
Okay.
jail. This is not an advertise. This is not a threat. This is you are going to jail if you violate our civil constitution, and this is very hard. This is very hard because, of course, uh, what has to do about property rights with human and economic development is to protect the ideas we have, and this is very important. Also to protect the objects we own we own,
Mhm.
and in nations, in countries that government are not efficient, this is very hard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's all our questions that we have to you. So thank you very much, Rafa, and I hope we see you soon.
Thank you,
We're
Emilio.
we're going back to the studio. Thank
Thank
you,
you, Emilio.
and good afternoon.
Thank you for the invitation and good work. Goodbye.